My daughter-in-law's 5-year plan. I'm 66 years old. I just discovered something. My daughter-in-law is stealing my house. Not metaphorically. Actually stealing it. With lawyers. With documentation. With a 5-year plan. You know what adverse possession is? It's a California law. Live in someone's house for 5 years. Document everything carefully. You can legally claim it's yours. My daughter-in-law Rachel knows this law. She's been here 7 months. She needs 53 more. She thinks I don't know. Thinks I'm just a lonely old man. Grateful they moved in. I heard everything. March 15th, 11:47 p.m. I was standing at the top of my stairs. Voices from the kitchen below. Rachel's voice. A strange man's voice. Not my son. My life split in half that night. Before, I thought she was a good daughter-in-law. After, I knew she was a con artist. If you have elderly parents. If relatives suddenly seem too caring. Share this story. This happens every single day in America. I almost became a victim. But I fought back. And I won. Let me tell you how it happened. How I discovered the truth. And how I stopped her. That night. 11:47 p.m. Tuesday in March. I woke up thirsty. My bedroom's on the 2nd floor. The kitchen's downstairs. I got up. Walked quietly to the door. Old habit. When Margaret was alive, I'd walk softly. Didn't want to wake her. She died 3 years ago. Cancer. But the habit remained. I opened my bedroom door. Stepped into the hallway. That's when I heard voices. Downstairs. Coming from the kitchen. Rachel's voice. My daughter-in-law. And a man. Not my son David. I stopped. My hand gripped the stair railing. Heart pounding hard. The man was speaking. Professional tone. Lawyer voice. I've worked as an architect for 42 years. Dealt with lawyers constantly. I know that sound. He mentioned the term. Adverse possession. California law. Requires 5 years continuous residence. Rachel responded. Her voice was clear. She said, 7 months so far. She said, keep documenting everything. She said, establishing residency proof. The man asked, does the old man suspect anything? Rachel laughed. Light. Casual. She called me old and lonely. Said I was grateful they moved in. Said I practically begged them to come. Then she said a number. $580,000. My house's value. The house Margaret and I bought in 1986. The house where we raised David. The house I paid off 15 years ago. The man asked, does David know? Rachel's answer was clear. My son had no idea. He thought they were helping me. She said, it's perfect. I stood in that dark hallway. Don't know how long. Maybe minutes. Felt like hours. My hand gripped the railing so tight. Knuckles went white. Then my other hand slipped. The water glass fell. Crashed on the hardwood floor. Glass shattered. Loud. The kitchen voices stopped instantly. Complete silence. I turned. Walked back to my bedroom quietly. Got into bed. Pulled the covers up. My heart was hammering. Thought it might explode. A few minutes later. Rachel came upstairs. I heard her footsteps. She stopped outside my door. Listening. I kept my breathing slow. Steady. pretending to sleep. She finally moved on. Down the hall. To her and David's room. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Let me back up. Explain how we got here. 3 years ago. My wife Margaret died. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4 when they found it. She was gone in 8 weeks. After the funeral, this house felt too big. 4 bedrooms. Margaret's garden I couldn't maintain. My studio sitting empty. Used to draft building plans by hand there. Before everything went digital. Too many memories. In every room. Too much silence. Silence that hurt. My son David started calling more often. Every Sunday at first. Then every other Sunday. Then once a month. I understood. He had his own life. San Jose. 40 minutes away. Might as well be across the ocean. He had a wife. Rachel. 2 kids. Emma, 7 years old. Lucas, 5. Rachel was the one who really stepped up. After Margaret died, she'd call 2 or 3 times a week. Just to check in. Ask how I was doing. Whether I'd eaten that day. Send photos of the grandkids. Remember my birthday. Cards and small gifts. She was sweet. Thoughtful. More attentive than my son. Bless him. But David was never great at that. I thought he'd married well. 6 months ago, Rachel called with a proposal. She'd been thinking, she said. I was all alone in that big house. What if something happened? What if I fell? No one would know for hours. She and David had been talking. What if they moved in with me? Just temporarily. While they saved for a bigger place. The housing market was insane, she explained. They were in a 2-bedroom apartment. The kids needed space. And I had 4 bedrooms sitting empty. They'd help with everything, she promised. Groceries. Utilities. Maintenance. And I'd have family around. The kids would love spending time with Grandpa. Every day. It made sense. The house was too big for one person. That was true. I'd paid off the mortgage 15 years ago. Property taxes were manageable. My retirement income covered them. But maintenance was becoming a burden. The roof needed work. The deck was rotting in places. Margaret had always handled finding contractors. Negotiating prices. I was terrible at that. Maybe having David and Rachel here would help. Maybe I wouldn't feel so alone. I told Rachel I'd think about it. 3 days later, she called again. Had I thought about their conversation? I said yes. If they thought it would help. They were welcome to move in. Temporarily. Rachel sounded genuinely grateful. Said I had no idea what this meant to them. They moved in 2 weeks later. At first it was actually nice. The house had life again. Emma's laughter echoing through the rooms. Lucas running down the hallway. The smell of Rachel's cooking. She made excellent lasagna. I have to admit that. Rachel insisted on organizing everything. Posted a chart on the refrigerator. Chore rotations. Meal plans. Bill splitting arrangements. They'd cover groceries and utilities, she said. I shouldn't pay a thing. We were family. David seemed tired most evenings. He works in tech. Long hours. Constant deadlines. He'd come home. Eat dinner in front of his laptop. Barely talk. Rachel handled everything. The kids' schedules. Household shopping. Coordinating maintenance workers. When the deck finally got repaired, she kept telling me to just relax. Let them take care of things. I appreciated it. I really did. But looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. Small things. Rachel started rearranging furniture. To maximize space, she said. She moved Margaret's favorite reading chair to the garage. Said it was taking up too much room. That chair, where Margaret would sit every evening, reading her mystery novels. Rachel put it in the garage, like it was nothing. She suggested I clear out my studio. The kids could use it as a playroom. She asked if I'd ever considered renting the garage, just to offset costs. I said no to that one. The garage was where I kept things. My drafting table, my old blueprint tubes, Margaret's gardening tools. Sacred space. Rachel smiled. Said of course. Just a thought. Then there was the conversation. One Saturday morning, I was in the hallway, about to head downstairs. I heard Rachel on the phone. In the kitchen. Her voice was low, businesslike, different from her usual warm tone with me. I caught fragments. Something about establishing residency, documentation being important, 5 years being the minimum in California. She stopped talking abruptly. She'd seen me. Her face transformed instantly. That warm smile appearing, like putting on a mask. She said she'd been talking to a friend about property law stuff, boring legal things. I asked what kind of property law. She laughed it off. Said just general knowledge. You know how it is. Then offered to make me tea. I accepted the tea. But that phrase stuck with me. 5 years is the minimum in California. What did that mean? I didn't connect it to anything concrete. Not then. Just filed it away as odd. Now, standing in my bedroom at midnight, after overhearing that conversation with her lawyer, it all made horrible sense. The next morning, Rachel made breakfast. Pancakes with fresh berries. Coffee exactly how I like it. 2 sugars. Splash of cream. She greeted me cheerfully. Asked if I'd slept well. I looked at her face. That sweet smile. Those concerned eyes. All performance. All manipulation. Every kind word. Every thoughtful gesture. Every moment of seeming care. All calculated. Building trust. Establishing herself. The devoted daughter-in-law. So that 5 years from now, when she filed legal papers claiming my house, she'd have a story to tell. I told her I'd slept fine. She touched my shoulder. Set down my plate. Said I was the best. I forced myself not to flinch. For 3 days, I pretended everything was normal. Smiled when Rachel smiled. Thanked her for meals. Played with Emma and Lucas in the backyard, all while my mind raced. What do I do? Confront her? She'd deny everything. Twist it around. Make me look paranoid. Tell David? Would he believe me? His own wife? Call the police? What crime had been committed? They'd been invited to live here. I needed proof. Real proof. Documented proof. I needed a lawyer. Saturday morning, while everyone was out, Rachel had taken the kids to soccer practice. I went to my home office. Found the business card. Saved 3 years ago, when Margaret's estate was being settled. Patricia Gwynn, estate planning attorney. She'd been competent, trustworthy, no nonsense. Exactly what I needed now. I called her personal cell number. She remembered me immediately. Asked how I was doing. I told her I needed help. That it was urgent. Her tone shifted instantly. Became focused. Professional. She told me to explain everything. I did. The overheard conversation. The 5-year adverse possession plan. The $580,000 target. The 7 months they'd already been documenting. There was silence on the line. For a moment. Then Patricia asked, "How long have they been living with you?" 7 months, I confirmed. She said we had time. But we needed to act fast. And smart. I asked what I should do. She gave me 3 instructions. First, don't confront them yet. Don't let them know I know. Second, start documenting everything on my end. Third, come to her office Monday morning, 9 a.m. I thanked her. Then she asked one more question. One that made my stomach drop. Does your son know about this? I said I didn't think so. She told me I needed to find out. Because if David was involved, this became much more complicated. That weekend was torture. Saturday dinner. Rachel served pot roast. With roasted vegetables. She asked if I wanted more carrots. I smiled. Said no thank you. I watched her with Emma and Lucas. The perfect mother. Reading bedtime stories. Helping with homework. Tucking them in with kisses. All while plotting to steal their grandfather's home. David barely looked up from his phone. The entire evening. Work emails. Always work emails. At one point, I tried to casually ask, "How's the apartment search going?" David looked confused. Apartment search? Rachel jumped in smoothly. Said they'd put that on hold. The market was still terrible. Maybe they'd look again next year. Next year. Then the year after. Then the year after that. 5 years total. Then she'd file legal papers. Claiming my house was hers. Sunday morning. I couldn't stay in the house. Needed air. Needed to think. I went for a walk. Ended up at the small park. 3 blocks away. The one Margaret and I used to visit. Sunday mornings before she got sick. An elderly woman was there. Feeding pigeons. She looked familiar. After a moment I placed her. Mrs. Patterson's sister. She lived a few streets over. She greeted me by name. Said she remembered my wife Margaret. Offered condolences. We sat in comfortable silence. For a few minutes. Then she said something. Something that made my blood run cold. She mentioned seeing my daughter-in-law. At the community center. Taking classes. Real estate law classes. Property management classes. Rachel had apparently told the instructor. She was learning to manage family assets. Said I'd asked her to help with my estate. I told this woman. Dorothy Williams was her name. I told her I'd never asked Rachel to help with my estate. Dorothy nodded slowly. Said she thought that might be the case. I asked why. She told me she'd seen this before. Her own nephew had done something similar to her sister 20 years ago. Moved in to help. Started taking over. Within 2 years, he'd convinced Dorothy's sister to sign over power of attorney. Her sister died broke. 3 years later, Dorothy stood up. scattered the last of her birdseed. She looked at me seriously, said I should get a lawyer who specializes in elder law, that these people are predators, and they're very good at what they do. Then she walked away, left me sitting there. Monday morning, I drove to Patricia and Wynn's office. Glass and steel building downtown. Very different from the cozy Victorian house where she used to practice. She greeted me professionally, led me to a conference room, told me to explain everything again, with every detail I could remember. I did. The midnight conversation, the timeline, the specific legal term, adverse possession, the $580,000 figure, Rachel's lawyer contact. Patricia took detailed notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she sat back, explained the legal reality I was facing. She pulled out a printed document. California Civil Code Section 325. Adverse possession. In California, she explained, someone can claim ownership of property they don't legally own if they meet 5 specific requirements for 5 continuous years. She listed them. First, hostile possession. They're occupying without the true owner's permission. The tricky part here. I'd invited them to live with me, but if they're secretly claiming it against my wishes, that could qualify. Second, actual possession. They're physically living in the property. Check. Rachel and David are there every day. Third, open and notorious. They're not hiding their occupancy. They're living there openly. Another check. Fourth, exclusive possession. They're acting like owners, not just guests. The way Rachel had taken over household decisions, the furniture rearranging, the suggestions about the garage. She was building this case. Fifth, continuous for 5 full years, without interruption. Rachel was building a case for all 5 requirements. 7 months down. 53 months to go. I asked if she could actually succeed. Patricia's face was serious. She said if I did nothing, if I let them stay for 5 years, if Rachel continued documenting everything. Yes. It was rare. But it happens. Especially with elderly homeowners who die before the 5 years are up. I felt sick. Patricia continued. She said we had several options. The nuclear option. Immediate formal eviction. Serve them with 30 days notice to vacate. Legal and clean. But that would destroy my relationship with David. Possibly forever. I told her I didn't want that, if I could avoid it. So she presented the strategic approach. She slid several documents across the table. First, a complete estate planning update. We'd create a living trust. Everything would go into it. The house, my retirement accounts, my savings. I'd maintain complete control while alive. But upon my death, assets would transfer according to the trust terms. No probate. No contestation. I asked what that accomplished. She explained. It would make it much harder for Rachel to claim the house even if she tried. The property wouldn't be in my name anymore. It would be in the trust's name. That complicates adverse possession claims significantly. Second, a formal residency agreement. David and Rachel could continue living with me, but we'd formalize it in writing. It would explicitly state they're temporary guests, with no ownership rights, zero claim to the property. They'd have to sign it. I asked if they would sign it. Patricia said if they refused, that would tell me everything I needed to know. If they did sign it, their adverse possession case would collapse entirely, because they'd be admitting in writing they're guests, not owners. Third, a no contest clause in the trust. This was the nuclear deterrent. Anyone who challenged my estate plan or attempted to claim my property through any means, adverse possession, undue influence claims, competency challenges, would immediately forfeit their entire inheritance. Everything would go to my grandchildren instead, Emma and Lucas, or to charity. My choice. I stared at the documents for a long moment. It all felt so cold, so calculated. I said as much to Patricia. She looked at me seriously, said what Rachel was doing was cold. I wasn't being cruel. I was protecting myself from theft. She also said something else, something that stuck with me. She asked if I'd been tracking how much money I'd given David over the years. I hadn't really. But when I got home that afternoon, I sat down, made a list. The numbers were staggering. College tuition at UC Berkeley, 1998 to 2002, $87,400. Graduate school, 2002 to 2004, $45,000. Down payment help for his first apartment, $25,000. Wedding costs, $32,000. Various emergency loans. Between 2015 and 2020, $48,600. Car down payment, $15,000. Total, $253,000. None of it repaid. All of it given freely. Because he was my son. Because that's what parents do. And now his wife was planning to take the one major asset I had left. My home. Margaret's home. Worth $580,000. The full picture was coming into focus. That evening, I called David. Asked if he could come over alone. Said I needed to talk to him about something important. He hesitated. Asked if everything was okay. I said I just needed to talk. Father and son. He agreed. Said he'd stop by after work. Around 7. Rachel was suspicious immediately. She asked what I needed to talk to David about. Her voice was light, casual, but her eyes were sharp. I told her it was just some financial paperwork. Boring estate planning stuff. She offered to help. Said she'd been learning about estate planning in her classes. I thanked her, but said this was a father-son conversation. Nothing to worry about. Her smile tightened. Just slightly. But she said of course. No problem. David arrived at 7:15. Rachel had conveniently taken Emma and Lucas to their swimming lessons. We sat in my home office, with the door closed. David looked uncomfortable. Asked what was going on. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. He's 41 now. Dark circles under his eyes. Thinner than he used to be. Stress had aged him. I needed to know if he was part of this. So I asked him directly, "How much do you know about adverse possession law?" His face went blank. Confused. He asked what I was talking about. I asked if he and Rachel had discussed adverse possession at all. He said no. Asked again what this was about. Said I was scaring him. I watched his eyes carefully. Watched his body language. I've spent 42 years reading people. During contract negotiations. Analyzing whether contractors were lying about costs. Whether clients were hiding information. Whether partners were trustworthy. I know what lying looks like. David wasn't lying. He was genuinely confused. And concerned. So I took a breath. And I told him everything. The overheard conversation. The 5-year plan. The $580,000 appraisal. The lawyer Rachel had consulted. The real estate law classes. The documentation of residency. David's face went through several expressions. Confusion. Disbelief. Shock. Anger. He said it was insane. That Rachel wouldn't do that. I told him I'd heard her with my own ears. That her exact words were. She'd been documenting residency for 7 months. And needed 5 years total. He stood up. Started pacing. Ran his hands through his hair. Said it didn't make sense. That they'd moved in to help me. That Rachel had insisted on it. Because she was worried I was alone. I asked if Rachel had been taking real estate law classes. He stopped pacing. His face went pale. He admitted yes. But said she'd told him it was for career development. That she wanted to get her real estate license. To supplement their income. I asked if he'd known she had my house appraised. He looked like I'd hit him. Said he had no idea. I could see the moment. It all crashed down on him. The moment he realized. His wife had been lying to him. 4 months. Using him as cover. For her scheme. He sat down heavily. In the chair. Asked what he should do. Said if he confronted her. She'd deny it. That she was good at that. I asked if she'd lied to him before. About other things. Long pause. He admitted sometimes he thought so. Little things. Where money went. Who she was talking to. But he'd convinced himself he was being paranoid. I told him he wasn't paranoid. We sat in silence. For a few minutes. Then David looked up. Asked what I was going to do. I told him about Patricia. About the legal protections we were putting in place. He asked if I was kicking them out. I said not if he was innocent. But I needed to know whose side he was on. He said mine. Always mine. So I handed him the documents. Patricia had prepared. The residency agreement. The trust documents. The no contest clause. He read through them slowly. His hands were shaking. When he got to the no contest clause. The part that said, anyone who challenged my estate, or attempted adverse possession, would be disinherited completely. He looked up. Said Rachel would know this was because of her. I said I didn't care what Rachel thought. He looked at me. For a long moment. Then he said he was sorry. So sorry. That he'd brought her into my home. That he'd endangered me. I told him he didn't know. He said he should have known. He signed as a witness. On all the documents. After David left. I sat alone in my office. The papers were complete. Signed. Notarized. My home was legally protected. But at what cost? My son's marriage was about to implode. My grandchildren would be traumatized by divorce. My family. What was left of it? Was about to shatter. Was I doing the right thing? Then I remembered Rachel's voice. In that midnight conversation. How she'd laughed. When asked if I was suspicious. How she'd called me old and clueless. How she'd said it was perfect. Yes. I was doing the right thing. Patricia suggested we handle the confrontation formally, in her office, with David present, with everything documented. It would give us legal protection, she explained. Witnesses, documentation, a controlled environment, where Rachel couldn't manipulate the situation emotionally. We scheduled it for Friday evening, October 13th. David told Rachel that morning. Said my lawyer wanted to meet with all of us, to finalize some estate planning, make sure everything was organized. Rachel was apparently thrilled. Told David she was so glad I was getting my affairs in order, that it was so important for family to be involved in these things. 4 p.m. Patricia's conference room. David and I arrived first. Sat on one side of the long table. Rachel arrived 10 minutes later. She dressed professionally. Nice blouse and slacks. Hair styled perfectly. Makeup done. She looked like someone going to an important business meeting. She greeted us warmly. Thanked me for including her in this. Said family should definitely be involved in estate planning. Patricia gestured to a chair across from us. Rachel sat down, still smiling. Patricia opened a folder and began. She thanked Rachel for coming. Confirmed she'd been living in my house for approximately 7 months now. Rachel corrected her cheerfully. Said 7.5 months actually. Time flies when you're happy helping family. Patricia asked her to describe the nature of the living arrangement. Was she a tenant? A guest? A co-owner? Rachel's smile flickered slightly. She said they were family. They lived there to help me, to keep me company. Patricia asked if she'd characterize it as temporary. Rachel said she supposed so, though they'd been contributing financially. Groceries, utilities, home repairs. Patricia made a note, then asked about the real estate law classes Rachel had been taking at the community center. Rachel's face went completely still. She asked how Patricia knew about that. Patricia repeated the question. Was Rachel taking real estate law classes? Rachel admitted yes, but said it was for career development. She was pursuing her real estate license. Then Patricia slid a document across the table. It was a printout. Search history from a computer. Rachel's computer. David had found it. Brought it to Patricia. The password-protected laptop Rachel thought was private. The search terms were all there. Adverse possession California requirements. How long to claim property through residency? Can family members file adverse possession? Documenting occupancy for property claims. Elder financial exploitation defenses. Rachel stared at the printout. Her face had drained of all color. She asked where Patricia got that. David spoke for the first time. Said he got it from the computer Rachel used in the house, the one she thought was protected. He'd set up the computer. He knew the password. Rachel turned to him. Asked if he'd gone through her personal files. David's voice was cold. Said yes, because she was plotting to steal his father's house. Rachel's mask was cracking. Her voice rose. She said it was a misunderstanding. That she'd been researching for a friend who was dealing with property issues. Patricia cut her off. Said they had testimony from witnesses who'd overheard conversations between Rachel and a lawyer named Marcus Wu. Asked if that name sounded familiar. Rachel said nothing. Patricia continued. Said Marcus Wu had confirmed under legal questioning that Rachel consulted him about adverse possession strategies. that she was building a 5-year plan to claim ownership of my property, that they discussed fabricating evidence of my cognitive decline to strengthen the case. Rachel started to say she never, but Patricia interrupted again, said they had recordings. That was a bluff. We didn't actually have recordings. But Rachel didn't know that. Her face went from pale to flushed red. She demanded to know if we'd recorded her. Patricia asked if anything she'd said was untrue. Silence. Then Rachel stood up, slammed her hands on the conference table. The mask came off completely. She said fine. Yes. She'd researched adverse possession because she wanted to know her legal rights. If they were living in my house for years, if they were maintaining it, paying for things, she said they had rights too. Patricia's voice stayed calm, reminded her they were invited guests. Guests don't acquire ownership rights. Rachel's voice got louder, said they weren't just guests. They were family, taking care of an old man who couldn't manage on his own. I spoke up then, quietly, reminded her I was sitting right there, and I could manage just fine. Rachel whirled toward me, and for the first time, I saw the real Rachel, the one who'd been hidden behind the sweet smiles and gentle voice. Cold, calculating, furious. She started yelling, called me an ungrateful old man, said they'd given up their lives to help me, that they'd moved in because I was lonely and pathetic after Margaret died, said they'd taken care of me, cooked for me, cleaned for me, asked if this was how I repaid them. I kept my voice level, said they'd moved in to steal my house. Rachel's face twisted. She screamed that they'd earned that house, asked if I knew how much time she'd spent cleaning up after me, listening to my boring stories about architecture, pretending to care about my stupid buildings. David told her to stop. She rounded on him, asked if he was just going to sit there and let me kick them out after everything they'd done. David's voice was quiet but firm, said everything she'd done, that he hadn't known about any of it, that what she'd done was theft, fraud. He said it was evil. Rachel completely lost it then, started screaming that evil was an old man hoarding a $500,000 house while his own son struggled in a 2-bedroom apartment. That evil was having money and refusing to share it with family who actually needed it. I stayed calm, told her it was my money, mine and Margaret's. We'd worked 42 years for it. She'd been part of the family for 7 months. That didn't entitle her to anything. Rachel used language I won't repeat. Patricia stood up, suggested Rachel leave before security was called. Rachel grabbed her purse, looked at David, asked if he was coming with her. David shook his head. She asked if he was choosing me over her. David said he was choosing what was right over what was criminal. Rachel's face went through several expressions. Shock, rage, something that might have been genuine hurt beneath the anger. She said fine, but that this wasn't over. She'd get a lawyer. She'd fight this. Patricia's voice stayed level, said Rachel could try, but the estate trust included a no-contest clause. Any legal challenge would result in complete disinheritance. Rachel would get nothing. Everything would go to Emma and Lucas instead. That stopped her cold. Patricia spelled it out clearly. If Rachel filed any claims, adverse possession, undue influence, anything. She'd lose everything. No inheritance. Nothing. If she walked away now and behaved, she might still receive something. When I eventually passed away, years from now, Rachel looked at me, then at David, then at Patricia. Then she stormed out, without another word. The door slammed so hard, the framed law degrees rattled on the wall. The three of us sat in silence. David looked destroyed. Said he had to go home. Had to figure out custody arrangements, divorce proceedings, everything. I told him I was sorry. He said not to be. That I'd saved him from a mistake he didn't even know he was making. He left a few minutes later. Patricia asked if I was okay. I said no, but that I would be. She said I'd done the right thing. I asked why it felt so terrible, if it was right. She didn't have an answer for that. Rachel moved out that weekend. Took Emma and Lucas with her. Moved in with her parents in Oakland. David filed for divorce the following Monday. The house felt empty again. But it was a different kind of empty than before. When Margaret died, the empty had been full of grief, full of missing her, full of memories in every room. This empty was quieter, calmer. It was the empty of peace. David came over the Wednesday after Rachel left. He looked exhausted, 10 years older than he had a week ago. He explained that the divorce lawyers said it would take at least 6 months. Rachel was fighting for custody, for alimony. She was claiming David had turned me against her, that the family had conspired against her. She wanted half the value of my house. Her lawyer argued, since they'd lived there and contributed financially, she was entitled to equity. I said that was absurd. David said Rachel's lawyer disagreed. He apologized again. Said this was his fault for not seeing who Rachel really was. I told him it wasn't his fault. That manipulators are good at what they do. That's why they succeed. We talked about what came next. Patricia had warned I might need to testify in the divorce proceedings. About the adverse possession plan. About the conversations I'd overheard. I told David I'd do whatever he needed. The divorce process was brutal. It took 7 months instead of 6. Rachel's attorney painted me as a controlling patriarch who'd manipulated David, who destroyed a happy family with paranoid accusations. Patricia countered with evidence. The search history. The documented consultations with Marcus Wu. Testimony from Dorothy Williams. About the real estate law classes. In the end, the judge saw through Rachel's story. David got primary custody of Emma and Lucas. Rachel got supervised visitation every other weekend. The financial settlement gave Rachel nothing from my property. She contested it. Tried to argue she'd been promised inheritance. Claimed there had been verbal agreements about property transfer. The judge threw it out with the documented adverse possession plan. No court was giving her anything connected to my house. Life slowly settled into a new normal. David moved out of my house. Found a small 2-bedroom apartment nearby. Said he needed his own space to process everything and rebuild. But he visited every week. Sometimes twice a week. We'd have dinner. Talk. Really talk. More than we had in years. He told me about the marriage. How there had been red flags he'd ignored. Small lies Rachel told. that he'd convinced himself were nothing. Times money went missing from their account, with vague explanations. He'd wanted to believe she was who she pretended to be. I understood that completely. Emma and Lucas started coming over on weekends. Without Rachel controlling the narrative, we built our own relationship. Just grandfather and grandchildren. We'd play board games, build elaborate Lego cities. I showed Emma my old drafting tools, taught her about architectural design, taught Lucas about how buildings are made to stand up against wind and earthquakes. They were good kids. This wasn't their fault. About 6 months after the divorce, I got a knock on my door one evening. It was Dorothy Williams, the woman from the park, who'd warned me about Rachel. She said she'd heard about everything that happened, wanted to check on me. I told her I was okay. Really okay. She smiled, said she was glad, that most people in my situation would have stayed silent. Let it happen. Because confronting family is terrifying. I said it was terrifying. She said I'd been brave anyway. That I protected myself. That it mattered. Then she handed me a business card. Elder Protection Alliance, Community Support Group. She explained they met every Thursday evening. People who'd been through similar situations. Financial exploitation by family members. Manipulation. Elder abuse. She thought I might find it helpful. I looked at the card for a long moment. Then I thanked her. Said I'd think about it. I started attending the support group. 3 weeks later, every Thursday evening, at the community center, there were usually about 15 people there. All over 60. All with stories. That made mine seem almost mild by comparison. Margaret T., 72 years old, told about her nephew, who'd convinced her to add him to her bank accounts for emergencies. Within a year, he drained $140,000. By the time she discovered it, he'd fled to another state. Thomas R., 68, described how his daughter had moved in after his wife's stroke. Within 18 months, she'd isolated him from friends, taken control of all finances, and forced him to sign over power of attorney while he was medicated after surgery. Linda K., 75, shared how her son-in-law had helped manage her investments after her husband died. Turned out he'd been systematically transferring her retirement funds into offshore accounts. She lost nearly $300,000 before discovering the fraud. The stories went on and on, each one a variation of the same theme. Family members who saw elderly relatives not as people to love and protect, but as financial resources to exploit. What struck me most was how similar the tactics were. The initial approach was always helpful, caring, concerned. You shouldn't be alone. Let us handle the complicated stuff. We're family. We take care of each other. The gradual takeover of finances, decisions, daily life, the isolation from other family members, friends, support systems, the documentation building quietly in the background, establishing residency, creating paper trails, positioning themselves as indispensable, and the final move, whether it was power of attorney signed under duress, property transfers, drained accounts, or adverse possession claims. The group facilitator, a woman named Susan Chen, who worked for the county's Adult Protective Services, explained that financial exploitation of elders was one of the fastest growing crimes in America. An estimated $36 billion stolen from elderly Americans every year. Most of it by family members. Most of it unreported. Because victims are ashamed, or don't want to destroy family relationships, or genuinely don't realize they're being exploited until it's too late. I asked how many cases actually result in prosecution. Susan's answer was sobering. Less than 1 in 20. The victims are often reluctant to testify against family. The exploitation happens slowly over years, making it hard to prove. By the time it's discovered, the money is usually gone and irrecoverable. I realized how fortunate I'd been. I'd discovered Rachel's plan early. I'd had resources, a good lawyer, enough awareness to recognize the warning signs, the financial means to fight back. Many of the people in that support group hadn't been so lucky. The group became important to me, not just for support, but for purpose. Susan asked if I'd be willing to speak at community events about my experience, help educate other seniors about the warning signs. I said yes. Over the next year, I gave presentations at senior centers, community colleges, library programs. I talked about the specific tactics Rachel had used: the gradual takeover, the fake concern, the documentation of residency, the 5-year adverse possession plan. But more importantly, I talked about the warning signs everyone should watch for. Family members who insist on helping with finances without clear documentation, sudden isolation from friends or other family members, changes in legal documents, wills, trusts, power of attorney that the elder doesn't fully understand, new helpers who seem overly interested in property values, inheritance timelines, estate planning, the feeling in your gut that something isn't right, even when you can't articulate exactly what. After each presentation, people would approach me privately. Some shared their own stories of exploitation or near exploitation. Others asked for advice about situations they were currently in. Adult children asking to move in. Relatives requesting access to bank accounts. Family members suddenly very interested in estate planning. I'd give them Patricia's contact information. Recommend they document everything. Trust their instincts. 2 years after Rachel left, something unexpected happened. I got a letter from Rachel. The return address was in Sacramento, 3 hours away. I stared at that envelope for a full day. Before opening it, Patricia had warned this might happen, that some perpetrators eventually attempt to reconnect, sometimes to apologize genuinely, sometimes to manipulate one more time. The letter was handwritten, 3 pages. Rachel started by saying she knew I probably wouldn't read this, that I had every right to throw it away. But she wanted me to know. She was in therapy. Had been for 18 months. Her therapist had diagnosed her with what they called financial trauma response patterns. Behavior developed from growing up in severe poverty, watching her parents lose their home to foreclosure, experiencing homelessness as a teenager. She developed a pathological fear of financial insecurity, a belief that she had to take what she could, secure resources however possible, because no one would help her otherwise. It didn't excuse what she'd done, she wrote, but it explained it. She said she was genuinely sorry, Not for getting caught. For doing it in the first place. For manipulating me. For using David. For putting Emma and Lucas through a divorce. She said she told Emma and Lucas the truth. When they were old enough to understand. That Grandpa Robert hadn't been mean. That she'd done something wrong. And he'd protected himself. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, she wrote. Just wanted me to know. She understood what she'd done. That she was working to become someone different. The letter ended with a single sentence. Thank you for stopping me. Before I became completely irredeemable. I read it 3 times. Then I called Patricia. Asked what she thought. Patricia said it was my decision entirely. But that the letter seemed genuine. That some people do change. With therapy and consequences. She also said I owed Rachel nothing. That if I wanted to throw the letter away. And never respond. That was completely valid. I thought about it for a week. Then I wrote back. 1 page. Brief. I acknowledged her letter. Said I believed her remorse was genuine. Told her I hoped she continued therapy. And built a better life. But I also said. We would never have a relationship. That the trust was too shattered. That what she'd done. Planning for months to steal my home. Wasn't something I could move past. I ended by saying. I hoped she'd be a good mother. To Emma and Lucas. That they deserved better. Than what she'd put them through. I mailed it the next day. Never heard from her again. Life continued. The house stayed mine. The trust was solid. My estate planning was bulletproof. David and I rebuilt our relationship. Into something stronger than it had been before. He remarried 3 years after the divorce. A kind woman named Jennifer. Who worked as a pediatric nurse. She had no interest in my money or property. Had her own career. Her own savings. Her own life she'd built independently. Jennifer got along well with Emma and Lucas. Never tried to replace Rachel. Just offered stability. And genuine care. I attended their wedding. Small ceremony in Golden Gate Park. David asked me to stand with him. It was a good day. Emma graduated high school this past June. She's heading to UC Berkeley in the fall. Wants to study architecture. She told me she'd been inspired. By the afternoons we spent in my studio. Looking at old blueprints. Talking about how buildings are designed to last. I set up an education trust. For her and Lucas. Not inheritance. Something separate. So they'd never have to struggle financially. Through school. The way their father had. David protested at first. Said I'd already given him so much over the years. I told him this wasn't about debt. Or obligation. This was about making sure my grandchildren had opportunities. He accepted with tears in his eyes. The support group continues every Thursday. I'm still a regular. Not because I need support anymore. I'm past that. But because new people show up constantly. Seniors who've just discovered they're being exploited. Who need to hear from someone. Who's been through it and survived. Last month. A man named Albert joined. 71 years old. His daughter had moved in 6 months ago. After his wife died. As he described the situation. Her helpfulness. Her insistence on managing his finances. Her suggestions about estate planning. I saw myself 3 years earlier. I waited until after the meeting. Asked if he'd be willing to talk privately. We went to the coffee shop next door. I told him my entire story. Rachel's plan. The 5-year adverse possession strategy. How close I'd come to losing everything. Albert listened with growing horror. Then he told me his daughter had recently asked him to add her name to the house deed, just in case something happens. She'd said it would make everything easier. Avoid probate. Keep things simple. I told him not to do it. Explained that once her name was on the deed, removing it would be nearly impossible. That it would give her legal ownership rights. That if their relationship soured, he could lose his home. I gave him Patricia's contact information. Told him to get independent legal advice before signing anything. He thanked me. Said he'd felt something was off, but couldn't articulate what. That his daughter had made him feel paranoid for questioning her motives. I told him trusting your instincts isn't paranoia. It's survival. I'm 70 years old now. For years since that midnight conversation changed everything. The house is still mine. Will be until I die. Then it will go to Emma and Lucas. Through the trust. Managed carefully by Patricia's firm. David will receive my retirement accounts and savings. Jennifer will be taken care of too. I've made sure of that. But the house, Margaret's house, my house, will go to the grandchildren, who actually spent time here because they loved me, not because they wanted to steal from me. I think about Rachel sometimes. Wonder if she really changed. If therapy helped. If she found peace with whatever trauma drove her to plan such calculated theft. I hope she did. Not for my sake. For Emma and Lucas's sake. But I don't regret how I handled it. I protected myself. Protected my home. Protected my son. From a fraudulent marriage. He didn't fully understand. That wasn't cruelty. That was survival. The hardest part wasn't the confrontation, or the divorce proceedings, or the legal battles. The hardest part was accepting that people you trust can betray you completely. That family doesn't automatically mean safety. That kindness can be performance. That concern can be manipulation. That love can be a long-term con. Margaret used to say, people show you who they are eventually. You just have to be willing to see it. She was right. Rachel showed me exactly who she was. That midnight in March, when she laughed about my loneliness and described her 5-year plan to steal my house. I just had to be willing to see it clearly, to accept what I was seeing, to act on it, despite the fear and guilt and family loyalty that screamed at me to stay silent. Last week, Dorothy Williams came by for tea. She's 83 now. Moves a little slower, but mind's still sharp as ever. We sat in my living room. The room Rachel once tried to rearrange and claim. Dorothy asked how I was doing. Really doing. I told her the truth. I'm good. Better than I've been since Margaret died. The house is peaceful again. My relationship with David is strong. Emma and Lucas are thriving. I have purpose. Through the support group and community education, I sleep well at night. Dorothy smiled. Said she was proud of me. That what I'd done took courage. Most people don't have. I thanked her. Said if she hadn't warned me that day in the park, I might not have taken the threat seriously enough. She shook her head. Said I'd have figured it out eventually. That I'm smarter than I give myself credit for. Maybe. Maybe not. All I know is this. I'm 70 years old. My name is Robert Chen. My daughter-in-law tried to steal my house, and I stopped her. The house is mine. The grandchildren are healthy. My son is happily remarried. And every Thursday evening, I help other people protect themselves from the same fate I almost suffered. Margaret would be proud of that. I think about her sometimes. Sitting in the reading chair Rachel tried to put in the garage. The chair I brought back inside. The day after she left. Margaret would have seen through Rachel immediately. She always could read people better than I could. But she's not here. And I had to learn to protect myself. I did. And that's enough. The house stands solid on its foundation. The trust is ironclad. The family, what remains and what's rebuilt, is stronger for having survived this. And I learned something important. Being kind doesn't mean being weak. Trusting people doesn't mean ignoring warning signs. Loving family doesn't mean accepting abuse. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, for the people who genuinely care about you, for your grandchildren's future, is to say no, to set boundaries, to protect what's yours, to stop the people who would exploit you, even when those people are family, especially when those people are family. I'm 70 years old. My house is paid off. My estate is protected. My family is healing. And every time I walk through these rooms that almost weren't mine anymore, I'm grateful I had the courage to fight back. Not everyone does. But I did. And that makes all the difference. If you're reading this, or listening to this story, and something feels wrong in your situation, trust that feeling. Document everything. Get legal advice. Tell someone you trust. Don't wait. Don't assume family means safety. Don't let guilt or love or obligation blind you to manipulation. Your home is yours. Your money is yours. Your life is yours. Protect it. Because predators count on you staying silent. They count on shame and fear. And family loyalty. Keeping you trapped. Don't be trapped. Fight back. Like I did. The end.